Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the fanfiction guy. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What if Harem Deku had Regen Quirk? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Well, hello there reader. It's me, the Dankest Fry. This is where I usually put warnings, but the only thing to note about this one is some mild language and possible suggestive content. We all have dreams, right? Let me tell you mine. I want to be a hero. That can mean a lot of different things, but where I come from, it has a much more solid interpretation. You see, I come from a world where power is unbalanced and opportunities are unequal. What is considered impossible becomes possible with superpowers, or as we call them, quirks. This power emerged from evolution 200 years ago, giving rise to both heroes and villains. But it only affected those with double X chromosomes females. The power once held by men has diminished, leaving them in a state of subjugation. Men lost a majority of their rights in all countries. It took 175 years for them to even be regarded as human. Of course, quirks were just a part of evolution, and with enough time, a genetic mutation occurred in me. You see, when I was born, my parents rejected me. I was a boy in a world dominated by women. Every day felt like hell, but I had a light in the sea of darkness, my hero, All Might. She was the #1 hero in the world and was considered the best there ever was. But she wasn't my light just because she was #1. It was because of what she said. I had just turned 4 when I was bullied by my former best friend, Katsuki Bakugo. She was an explosive blonde with a quirk to match. It was just after school when she decided that someone was going to be her target that day. Maybe it was her ego or her inability to understand the consequences of her quirk, but she chose a girl who was already an outcast. In a world where differences were often frowned upon, she and her friends pulled the young girl off her swing and dragged her away from the adults. But I couldn't just stand by. I rushed in between them, using my body as a shield for the girl. "Stop, Katsuki. You're going too far," I shouted, always too nosy and caring for my own good. "And what are you going to do about it, Deku?" Katsuki retorted, her voice dripping with disdain as she used the nickname I had come to loathe. I will protect her," I stammered, trying to sound brave. "Oh really now, Deku? Know your place. You're nothing but a burden," Katsuki sneered, turning her full attention to me. "Hey, everyone, let's show this little brat his place. He deserves no pity," Katsuki commanded. I turned to run with the girl, only to find she had already fled. I ran as fast as I could, but it wasn't enough. Katsuki and her gang caught me and dragged me back to their hideout. They beat me until I was bruised and battered. It hurt immensely, and it felt like it went on for hours. I think that was the day I almost gave up, but it was also my first and last setback. I woke up late the next day. My mom, Inko, hadn't even bothered to look for me. I was hungry, and my head felt like it had been hit by a truck. I really didn't want to walk back home. But if I asked a stranger for help, they would wonder why a 4-year-old was wandering the streets looking hurt. That would probably involve the police, and Inko would lose custody of me. You might think that would be a good thing, but I knew what could happen to me if I ended up in the system. The thought made me feel sick. So I stuck to the shadows and walked back home. About 2.5 miles later, I passed one of those old TV shops that still had box TVs on display. But what caught my attention was what was on the screen. It was a rerun of the news, showing a young reporter interviewing none other than All Might. What really grabbed my attention was the subtitles. "All Might, how do you feel about the idea of men becoming heroes?" the reporter asked. "Well, I believe that anyone can become a hero with enough hard work. However, it would be dangerous, and I wouldn't recommend any man try to be one, but it's possible," All Might responded. Her words were sugar-coated and filled with doubt, but she still believed it was possible. That was all I needed. Sure, no one believed in me, but she did in her own way. It was that day I started training my mind and body. Fate smiled upon me for one of the very few times. My younger years weren't my best. I was bullied constantly at school and home. My life was miserable and I hated it. The only thing that kept me going were her words, "It's possible." That was all I needed. I spent years honing my mind and body. It didn't help that I was malnourished. I was short, scrawny, nothing but bones and a little muscle. I had stamina, though. I practiced running a lot. I think that was all I did when I was younger, run from bullies, my mom, my dad, and even from myself. I grew tired of it, so I did what any desperate person would do. I stole. I hated doing it, but it was the only way to keep from starving. I could barely lift my own body weight, let alone defend myself. I don't know what I would have done if my mother had been abusive in more ways than just mentally and physically. I was no longer hungry, no longer weak, and the hellish hunger pains had subsided. But, of course, I was caught eventually. After all, luck and skill only get you so far, and I was skilled. I had just turned 10 and wanted enough money for a cool new All Might shirt I saw in the store. By then, I had enough cash flow to stop worrying about food. I sold rings, watches, necklaces, anything I could take, I would sell. It also helped that I had grown in size from no longer being malnourished. Of course, I was still pretty short, but I was in great shape. At first, I had come close a few times. Finding a buyer wasn't as hard as you might think for a 10-year-old. All I had to do was use my brain, one of the few things no one could take from me. It took me a couple of weeks, but I found one on the web. The internet is a vast and dark place. Did you know that only 0.004% of it is accessible? That's over 5 million terabytes, more than 5 trillion megabytes. To say it was easy to find a buyer in some of the darker corners was an understatement. It was more like a walk in the park. But then again, I had always been too smart for my own good. I spotted a tall, scrawny blonde woman with a nice purse, easy pickings, usually. I thought about confronting her. She looked weaker than me, but that was too risky with no one around. So, I planned as I always did. She seemed to be in a hurry, probably not paying attention to her surroundings. All I had to do was get close. Without raising suspicion. If I ran too fast, she might hear me, and I couldn't have that. I quickened my pace just a bit faster than hers, but not enough to draw attention. It took about 15 minutes to reach her. Now came the distraction. Pulling my hoodie up to hide most of my features, I tripped into her, causing her to accidentally drop her bag. My keen mind scanned for the most valuable items in a split second. She had a wallet and what seemed to be a very nice phone. The phone was just within reach. The wallet looked fat, but I had to take what I could. Now came the tricky part, acting. "I'm so sorry," I said with feigned innocence. "Are you okay, young man?" the woman exclaimed. "I'm fine, ma'am. Are you?" I replied with a fake smile. She extended her arm to help me up. I took it without hesitation. "I'm just fine, young man. I'll be going right after I pick up my things," she said. Just as I wanted, I already had the phone in hand. "I'm really sorry, but I have to go home now," I lied through my teeth. She nodded and I was off. I was on borrowed time, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she noticed. As soon as I was out of her view, I ducked into an alley. It's kind of funny looking back. The years of pain all leading to this point. What was meant to be a simple job turned into something massive. I had just ducked into the alley, thinking I had gotten away. No way someone who looked like Jack Skellington could ever move fast enough to catch me, even if they wanted to. Boy, was I in for a surprise. You could say it was fate or just bad luck, but I had just stolen from All Might. You know, the number one hero I mentioned, my hero. Of course, I had no idea until about 45 seconds after ducking into the alley. At the time, I only suspected her. You want to know how I found out? A superpowered punch to the face from a freaking superpowered hero. But with my incredible luck, I managed to stay conscious. I was pretty sure it was because of my unusually high pain tolerance. Of course, she didn't know that, so I played dead. It's sad seeing children like you having to resort to this, All Might mumbled to herself. At that moment, I realized, oh no, it's All Might, my hero. Well, I didn't really think like that, but who cares about specifics, right? Other than being terrified, I devised a plan while playing dead. I thought about giving up. There was no way I could get away. Even if I managed to stun her somehow, she had godlike strength, speed, and reactions. So, yeah, that was the plan until I heard slow clapping. It sounded like something from a Bond villain, condescending and cocky. Just my luck. The worst villain ever known to humanity decided to attack. Oh, All Might, sweetie, attacking a poor innocent boy? The villain said, turning to face All Might. Although he is quite a cutie. A twisted smile spread across her face as All Might's smile faded. What's wrong? I thought only the strong could smile. All for One said with a sinister grin. You monster! All Might shouted, rage evident in every word. Her once cheerful demeanor was replaced with fury. Whoa, 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 watch the language, a child is present, the villain teased. Speaking of him, where is he? The villain genuinely asked. You may be wondering what I was doing. Well, other than trying not to cry, I had bolted out of there. Not a second too late, or I would have been caught in the chaos. The alley I had just been in was blown to pieces. I knew it was do or die, and I did not want to die. Of course, just like most things I tried to do, I messed it up. How you asked? Well, as destruction rained down everywhere, I was getting out of dodge. But that changed quickly when the chaos suddenly stopped. That either meant All Might had won or the villain had. But I knew she had lost, otherwise, she would have already used her booming voice to comfort citizens and announce her victory. But it never came. I knew I would probably be useless, but by the time I realized it, I had already arrived. I was greeted by the sight of the villain hammering down on All Might. Blow after blow broke down her defenses. I couldn't even try to get close because of the shockwaves, or so I thought. I don't know how, but when she went in for the kill, I just knew. I could see it in the villain's smile. All Might was going to fall, and I could do nothing but watch. That was possibly the most despair I had ever felt. Not the beatings, not all the remarks, nothing in my entire life had prepared me for such despair. Maybe that's what activated it, my quirk. You might be wondering, but Izuku, you said guys can't have quirks. To that, I would say, I did mention that, but I also said I had a genetic mutation. Let me explain. The reason men typically don't have quirks is due to genetics. For some reason, females experienced a sudden leap in evolution. Even today, we don't fully understand why. Research into DNA only began in earnest in the 1970s, and it's only recently that we've started examining what was previously dismissed as junk DNA material that many scientists overlooked, but which turned out to be significant. For some reason, my body inherited the quirk gene from my mother. It was just harder for me to activate because I didn't believe I had one. Therefore, I couldn't activate something I didn't think I possessed. But in extreme situations, your body can take over, and you can do things that no one, not even yourself, thought possible because you don't think, you just act. I don't remember much, just an overwhelming pain and a scream. The more I try to recall, the more it feels like my forgotten memories are slipping away. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital bed next to a beautiful detective. My mother, Inko, was standing beside her, glaring down at me, just out of sight of everyone else. I sensed trouble brewing. But from the looks of it, I was safe with the detective. My mother could be violent, but even she wouldn't attack an officer. The detective looked at me with pity, which wasn't uncommon for me, but there was something more in her compassion, something I had never seen or thought anyone could feel for me. The detective sighed deeply before speaking. I don't know where to begin with your case. We brought you in from the fight between All Might and the top villain, All for One, thinking you were just a casualty of their battle. But what we heard from All Might changed that. She paused, then continued, you apparently used a quirk to fight and defeat the #1 villain. The fact that you have a powerful quirk is one thing, but your scars are another matter. Inko looked absolutely terrified. Not only had the police discovered my scars, but they also knew I had a quirk. I was confused and brushed it off as a sick joke. It wouldn't be the first time someone had done that to me. Oh, but where are my manners? I'm Naomasa Tsukachi, and you're Izuku Midoriya? I nodded silently. As much as I hate to ask, how did this happen? Tsukachi questioned. My eyes began to water. As much as I wanted to say it was from schoolyard fights, I knew that wouldn't make sense. I looked at Tsukachi, tears spilling down my cheeks, and pointed to my mother. Inko stood there, frozen like a statue. Tsukachi nodded and approached Inko, reading her rights and cuffing her before calling in another officer to take her into custody. I cried, years of sorrow and regret pouring out from behind my usually emotionless facade. Initially, I flinched when Tsukachi wrapped her arms around me in a comforting hug, but I soon found solace in her embrace. I cried until I couldn't anymore and eventually passed out. I woke up to someone gently running their fingers through my hair. Fear flooded my body at first, but it slowly faded as the person hummed a soothing melody that tried to lull me back to sleep. I fought against it and forced my eyes open, facing whoever was doing it. A familiar sight, yet I couldn't quite place her. A slender, surprisingly tall woman with beautiful blonde hair and piercing blue eyes stood before me. I thought she was a kind nurse. She smiled at me and I felt safe. Maybe it was her smile or her non-threatening demeanor, but I felt no fear. For the second time in my life, I didn't feel afraid in the presence of a woman. I couldn't help but smile, but then the realization hit me who she was. This couldn't be her, could it? "Boy, how are you?" the blonde woman asked. That's when it clicked: the voice, the looks. This was the woman I had stolen from. Fear gripped me once more, and my moment of happiness faded. What could she want other than money or revenge? I had nothing to give that would mean the latter. I braced myself for the worst: a beating or worse. I closed my eyes tightly as I saw her hand draw near. But instead of a punch or restraint, I felt another comforting hug and heard a question I hadn't been asked in a long time: "Are you okay?" Tears flooded my eyes again, but this time not from fear or sorrow, but from happiness that someone cared for me. That feeling of pure bliss is something I will never forget. Thank you for making me feel loved," I said as tears streamed down my face. I still can't believe that was all it took. It's kind of funny now. The woman with blue eyes smiled warmly. "You always will be from now on." Then she became more serious. "But we need to talk about your quirk and some other things." It was around that moment I realized this wasn't a joke, and I wondered if she was going to get me arrested. I sat in stunned silence. All Might stood there, gathering her thoughts as she prepared to speak to me. "I know you must be confused, but let me introduce myself. I'm Yagi Tashinori, and I work with the police. Why don't you tell me something about yourself?" Yagi paused, hoping for a response, but none came. "I understand your silence, but we must talk. Your mother, Inko Midoriya, is in police custody. We need evidence to hold her for more than 24 hours. Yagi paused her one-sided conversation as she noticed my eyes beginning to overflow with tears. I probably looked like I was breaking down because I knew what she was going to ask of me. Yagi bit her lip and forced herself to continue. "We need you to give a detailed eyewitness account," she said softly. I wiped my tears and the snot from my nose, putting on a brave face. "I know," I said dryly. Yagi seemed taken aback by how calmly I said it. Well, I thought you would be against it." "Oh, I almost forgot to mention, in case you're wondering, I won't be pressing charges," Yagi said happily. My heart felt a bit lighter, and a faint smile spread across my face. "Thank you, but you're right, I need to tell you what truly happened." I paused, gathering my thoughts, and Yagi scooted up next to me, offering a warm smile. "It all began when I was 3. My dad ran off with another woman and my mother, Inko, blamed me." Tears welled in my eyes, but I bit my tongue and held them back as I continued. "At first, it was just her ignoring me or calling me names like brat, useless, and failure. It really messed with me, you know?" I looked toward Yagi for comfort. She smiled and wrapped her arms around me in a hug. But about a year later, things escalated. She stopped cooking for me and drank a lot. I remember the first time I asked her why I couldn't eat. She looked at me with such hate in her eyes, and I'll never forget it. Then she raised her hand and struck me as hard as she could. I think that was the first time she physically hurt me. Yagi pulled out a notepad and wrote down what I had said while still keeping one arm on my back, rubbing soothing circles. But that was just the beginning. She liked to punish me. It was pure torment. I paused, the memories of my pain and fear threatening to overwhelm me, but I couldn't stop now. Not when I was so close to lifting this crushing weight off my heart. The punishments were unbearable. She would lock me in the basement without food or water for days, and the worst was what she called the punishment room. I can still remember that feeling of emptiness. She would tie me up in a soundproof room and leave me in the dark. It was the worst. I tried to continue, but the words caught in my throat. Yagi wrapped her arms around me tighter, doing her best to comfort me. I know it's hard, Izuku, but we need this. Remember, I am here, Yagi reassured me. I smiled. She made me feel safe even though I probably wouldn't see her again. But she was right, I needed to tell what happened. I couldn't hear or see. It almost drove me mad. But I had a light in the darkness, All Might. I continued. Yagi seemed flustered and a bit taken aback. Before she smiled and asked, "Do you want to know why?" I smiled back and said, No, of course not. It actually helps to wait and recollect my thoughts." So I began my story from when I was 4 years old. I had just turned 4 and was at the playground. Inko had left me there to spend time with her boyfriend. It was just my luck that the school bully decided to torment another girl. They pulled her off the swings and dragged her into an area where no adults could see. But I saw it all, and being me, I tried to be a hero. It didn't end well. I grimaced at the memory. I woke up late in the afternoon. Inko hadn't even tried to look for me. I was hurt and tired, but I didn't ask for help. Yagi looked at me with confusion. "Why?" I gave a sad smile before saying, "If I did, Inko would have lost custody." Sure, she was abusive, but the foster system would have been worse. It's known for child trafficking, and most homes that don't want the children for their bodies do it for money. I wouldn't survive. Yagi looked down for a moment, her expression somber, before encouraging me to continue my story. Okay, back to the story. I had been walking for a bit when I saw an old box TV on display in a hardware store. The TV didn't matter, but what did was what was on it, a rerun of the day's news. It was a spectacular interview with All Might. I didn't care much for it until a question caught my attention. The interviewer asked All Might if a man could be a hero. You know what she said? I beamed. She said it was possible. I exclaimed. Yagi seemed disappointed. Yagi-san, do you not think men can be heroes? I asked sadly. Yagi looked shocked before responding, No. I just think All Might could have said something better, like, well, just, yes. That may not mean much to anyone else, but to me, it meant the world. Someone believed in my dream, and that was something no one had ever done for me. Believe in me. I was pretty sure I had never smiled bigger, and I could tell my grin surprised Yagi. It surprised me when she smiled back. But you know what else was surprising? The realization that she was All Might. It took me a moment to connect the dots, but her face matched All Might's perfectly. There was no way Yagi could have alerted a hero that quickly, and of all heroes, it had to be All Might. I sensed something was off, but it didn't anger me because I couldn't know for sure. I trusted my instincts from the first time she stood up for me. After all, All Might's, or rather Yagi's identity was a mystery, but I wondered why. Yagi noticed how my expression had shifted and how my smile had faded, so she asked, Izuku, are you okay? Yeah, I replied with a forced cheerfulness, but she saw through it. You're lying. Why? Yagi asked, a hint of frustration in her voice. Huh, you're a bit more perceptive than you look, Tashinori, or rather All Might, I said coldly. Yagi's smile faded, and her expression turned serious. How did you know? All Might asked, her voice a mix of surprise and concern. To tell you the truth, I wasn't sure until you confirmed it. So I basically need you to say it, I said bluntly, feeling a bit embarrassed. A surprised expression crossed Yagi's face, and to my astonishment, she smiled and let out a booming laugh reminiscent of All Might's. Touché, Izuku, touché. You are far more cunning than I first thought. I will admit, yes, I am All Might. So what gave it away? All Might asked. Well, if I had to say, your face resembles All Might's, and there's no way you could have gotten a hero nowadays to stop and listen to you over a phone thief. Getting the All Might to stop me is like a 1 in a million chance. Too many coincidences and too many holes in your story, I replied proudly, my triumphant grin returning. My boy, you truly are an interesting person. I apologize for lying to you, but I had to confirm you were a good man. After all, you did rob me, Yagi explained, mumbling the last part. I understand I robbed you, but why were you trying to see if I was a good man? You weren't lying about dropping the charges, were you? I asked, a hint of fear creeping into my voice. No, Midoriya. Well, you see, you have a quirk, the first and only man so far, not to mention it's quite powerful. With your mother out of the picture, you would have to be placed into the foster system. But as you already know, it is basically hell, and most of the parents are just people looking for money from the government for having foster kids, treating them poorly. What's worse is that it has become a child trafficking ring, with men making up only a small percentage of the population, almost all of them being elderly. Do you understand what I'm saying? Since you're the only male with a quirk, it would be, to say the least, much worse for you than for other children. Yagi concluded her lengthy explanation. Yeah, and that has something to do with me being a good man? I asked, extremely confused. Well, we knew you would need another option rather than foster care, and we had to find someone trusted to care for you. Originally, we had a civilian family prepared, but we realized you would be a high-priority target for villains. So we concluded that you should be in the care of a hero. However, we realized that no good hero would have time to raise a child. We were stumped for a while until a hero named Eraserhead suggested making you a resident in UA's dorms because it is constantly under surveillance, has heroes around it, and is essentially Fort Knox. But we were unsure whether to trust you. After all, you did rob me. So we wanted to see what kind of person you were. I'm proud to say you are just fine, All Might exclaimed with her trademark smile and thumbs up. I couldn't help but smile as well. It had been a long time since someone had looked out for me. But just as suddenly as the happiness came, All Might's expression turned serious. My boy, I had almost forgotten my second duty, to explain your quirk. I had nearly forgotten the entire reason I was hospitalized. My quirk, the fight, all of it. I may not remember everything, but bits and pieces lingered in my mind. We cannot fully confirm what your quirk is, but we believe it to be some form of regeneration. We are not sure what triggered the sudden access to the quirk, or that is what I was supposed to tell you. All Might paused. Izuku, I need you to promise me you will tell no one what you hear about yourself today. If not, it's best if you never hear what I'm about to tell you, All Might said, her voice cold and serious. A lump formed in my throat. I wondered why it was so hard to talk now. My hands felt clammy, and the world began to spin. But one thing remained clear. If I wanted to follow my dream, this was the only way. Yes, I said, trying my best to keep my composure. All Might nodded and continued. Izuku, we did tests, and you seem to carry the alpha gene or the quirk gene. You probably already know that. But what you weren't supposed to know is what exactly your quirk is. As I mentioned, it is a regenerative quirk. But what you don't know is how powerful it actually is. All Might sighed deeply before continuing. To tell you the truth, it scares me. No, it terrifies me to my very core. What I saw you do was awe-inspiring. Your quirk is quite common. Regeneration quirks are not new or impressive usually. They typically only allow a person to heal at a faster rate, not like in the movies where they seem nearly immortal. The ones that are effective often have unintended consequences. It's hard to determine whether someone has one because parents are not keen on hurting their child to find out. But what they don't know is that all it takes is a broken bone, and their body goes into overdrive to fix it, burning through its calories and fat reserves, leaving the child in a weakened state. Their bodies become mere shells of what they once were, and since their body constantly tries to fix itself, it only makes things worse. All Might's jaw clenched, and her face became more rigid. But she forced herself to continue. But you are different. Your body has changed ever so slightly, but that is all it takes. You see, while you would usually starve to death after taking that beating from her, you didn't. That's because your body has ultra-rich fat reserves, allowing it to burn through only a few fat cells while repairing muscle tissue and bones. The only drawback to your quirk is that if used excessively, it can result in starvation, and of course, the fact that you will likely be hungry all the time. All Might finally finished her explanation. Meanwhile, I felt super happy. Everything was going my way. I had finally escaped my mother and found a new home. I even had a quirk, which I never believed I could have. I got a new life and a fresh start. It was as if my life had received a second chance. I no longer had to steal or rob people to get by. For once in my life, I could live out my childhood, what little I had left, and be a somewhat normal kid. You might wonder how I managed to become the worst villain ever with just the power to regenerate. Honestly, I don't know either, but All Might did. My curiosity got the better of me, and I had to ask. They say curiosity killed the cat. Well, I was that cat because it nearly cost me my life. At the time, I had no clue and asked happily how I had done it. My only thought was about how impressive I must have been. All Might sank into her chair, looking apprehensive about telling me. A deep sigh escaped her before she spoke. I guess it's better if you know your limits. Izuku, you wouldn't have won if I hadn't been there, and I wouldn't have won without you. When I was about to lose, you just appeared. I don't know how, but you did. As soon as I saw you, you charged in, slamming your body into hers. She barely moved, but it was just enough to give me the space I needed to break free before she could react. But just like that, you were gone, blasted away by All for One's quirk. I felt broken for a moment. I thought I had failed. But then I felt rage. I wanted to make her pay. She had taken another life. At first, I fought back, but my anger blinded me, and the tides turned just like that. But then you appeared again, and this time you didn't disappear. Instead, you took a hit meant for me. I remember vividly how you struggled, and I thought for sure you were done for. But you began to move again, fueled by determination, and with a piece of rebar in hand, you went for All for One's eye. It struck true, and she let out a screech of pain. To say she was shocked when she threw you off would be an understatement, and I took advantage of that moment. She didn't stand a chance after that. But my thoughts weren't on her, they were on you. I searched and searched until I found you beneath a pile of rubble. I almost cried when I saw you lying there, motionless, but then I realized you were still breathing, barely hanging on. I thought you were going to die. I could get you to a hospital faster than any ambulance, but your body couldn't take it. So I rushed to your side to ease your pain. You simply smiled when you saw me and said in a weak voice, "All Might, you're okay." That's when I cried. Even in your final moments, you were asking if I was okay. Of all the people in the world, you were concerned about the number one hero. But in my agony over what I thought was your death, you said, "Don't cry, All Might. I'm going to be okay." It was followed by a smile I knew all too well, a smile meant to cover up fear and instill hope in others. The same smile I wore every day was now on a little boy. Then you closed your eyes and I thought you had died. But then your body began to heal itself, as if being mended by some divine force. It was a quirk. That was when I knew you were truly different. And the rest is history. All Might finished. I sat in stunned silence. Had I really been through that much? The thought of fighting a villain I hadn't even known about, All for One, who could rival what I had thought was an unbeatable force, scared me. If I were a normal boy, I would have been dead, gone without a word. I would have died quietly, not with a bang. People say your life flashes before your eyes when you're dying. Oddly enough, mine flashed before me when I thought of that moment. I was terrified. But it wasn't death that scared me, it was the thought that no one would care. I had no family that would grieve for me, no friends to mourn my passing. I was almost certain my mother wouldn't even bury me. She would probably just toss me into a lake somewhere to avoid the cost. The idea of no one even batting an eye bothered me. Would I really just be forgotten, fading away without anyone caring? But I didn't cry. I had known that for a long time. It was just that I was forced to confront it, no matter how hard I tried to look away. Death had always loomed over me, always breathing down my neck. The fear of it kept me moving, never giving in. It was a cruel teacher, living like an animal. But a great teacher nonetheless. Of course, it had made me physically and mentally strong, but it still left scars that would never fully heal, only scab over and serve as memories. A deep sigh escaped my mouth. So I only won by the skin of my teeth? All Might nodded and said, "Well, I didn't do any better." "So what now?" I asked. "Well, there will be a couple of court hearings, and then you'll be placed in a dormitory system at a place like UA so a hero can always monitor you." But from that point onward, it's up to you, kid, All Might said with a shrug. From there, it went just as All Might said, even down to the UA part. Well, not exactly, I only lived in the dorms. But I attended a middle school nearby. That's where I truly began anew. The court cases went well enough for them to rule in the hero's favor, but there were a few hiccups. I would stay at UA, but instead of attending classes there, I would be going to a middle school within a 3-mile radius. I could not be left unattended without a hero or someone vouched for by a hero or someone with a similar power, and I was required to attend a therapy appointment once a week. Even with All for One defeated, her influence could still affect me. The possibility of her being alive was very real. Because of that, I had to be accompanied by an A-rank hero almost all the time. However, this system was not perfect. Some heroes had been known to be less than stellar around certain individuals. With heroes being a necessity, A-rankers were protected by multiple government organizations, except in public and when it came to extreme violence. But even these rules could be overlooked if one was important or highly ranked. It may seem messed up, but in the eyes of the Hero Association, it was a necessary evil. Of course, if you were exposed, they would claim ignorance. This only contributed to the Hero Society's shift from a mindset of helping those in need to a get-rich-quick ideology. Since the rise of quirks, people were bred to obtain stronger ones. They wouldn't like to think about it, but more than one hero had been sent to prison to secure a legacy. As a result, heroes were selected based on their clean records and moral righteousness. The list I was given included All Might, a hero named Eraserhead, and even the intriguing Midnight. Apparently, she had a pretty good record despite her public persona. Of course, these three weren't the only heroes watching over me, they were just the only ones who were legally my guardians. With the court settled, my new life began. I returned to my modest apartment to gather my belongings. I had forgotten about the items I had taken, and with 5 heroes helping me move, it made for an awkward explanation. Instead of addressing it, I packed everything into a box and asked if someone could donate the contents. The heroes seemed surprised that someone with so little was donating but appreciated my willingness to do so. Without any further issues, I moved my clothes and a few hero collectibles, along with some knickknacks. A hero picked me up and took me to a cab, and I was off, taking my first step toward a dream that seemed impossible. It was massive in every sense: the building, the fence, even the doors. You might be wondering why I needed a hero nearby at all times. If you don't know what UA High is, where have you been for the last 45 years? UA High is the best school in Japan, if not the world, for teaching the art of being a hero. Who teaches these junior heroes? Real heroes. Pretty cool, right? This also meant I didn't have to bring along some awkward tag-along hero to every class. Only a few places in Japan were better guarded or had as many A and B rank heroes. With all of that, I knew I was as safe as I could be. I will admit I was a tad more excited than I let on. Like any enthusiastic 10-year-old, I wanted to do everything. Since the hero I was waiting for didn't show up exactly on time, I decided she wasn't coming and ran inside like a whirlwind. But you see, UA is a big place, a very big place. Probably not somewhere a 10-year-old could navigate easily. But I wasn't just any 10-year-old. Sadly, my quirk didn't help my sense of direction. So I got lost. Really lost. I was on the verge of tears when the bell for a new PRD rang, and that's when I started to cry. Some students noticed me, most just looked and moved on. But one girl with striking blonde hair and a cartoonish face didn't ignore me. In fact, she seemed to focus entirely on me. With a big smile and a friendly hand extended toward me, she knelt in front of me. I looked up and she wiped the tears from my eyes. Her smile calmed me. It was almost like All Might was there, but unlike him, her presence didn't demand respect, it radiated warmth. She made me feel safe. She locked eyes with me and said, "Hey there, kid. Are you lost?" My words seemed stuck in my throat. "What's wrong, sweetie?" she asked gently. I'm looking for Miss Aizawa Shoko," I managed to say as tears rolled down my face. "Miss Aizawa," she gulped. "Is she your mother?" she asked. Later, I would realize what this kind lady was thinking. How in the world did she create something so cute? She doesn't look like this adorable little broccoli, she's more like one of those mischievous geese. Quite the amusing thought, right? Now, as I was saying. Get it? Because I'm literally going to say it. Yeah, I deserve that. And no, she helps T take care of me, I snuggled back a response. Oh, thank goodness. I mean, I'm so relieved that you're all right. My name is Mirio Togata, but you can call me Mirio. And yours is? She said, extending her hand towards me for a handshake. Well, I'm not broccoli child. It's Izuku. Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you, Mirio. Since I can call you Mirio, you can call me Izuku, I replied, oddly firm while shaking her hand. Well, it's nice to meet you, Izuku, but I have to go to my next PRD, which, luckily for you, is with Ms. Aizawa, she said happily. She extended her hand for some reason and made a gesture that confused me. Did she want money? No, she didn't seem to indicate that. Maybe she wanted something I had? I began to empty my pockets when she tapped me on the shoulder, looking puzzled, and asked, Izuku, what are you doing? Well, you gestured for me to give you something, but I can't figure out what, I responded. Your hand, dummy. Did your mother never hold yours? She asked half-heartedly. Memories of my mom flooded my mind. She never treated me like her son, only like a stranger. She never let me out when her friends were over and acted like I wasn't her son when asked by others. She would say I was her distant cousin or nephew. Had she ever held my hand? Had anyone? No, she didn't, I said bluntly. Good joke, kid, and you even said it so seriously, she said, playfully hitting me on the arm. Then she looked at my face and froze. You were serious. I'm sorry, I didn't, she started, but I interrupted. Don't be. I'm over it. Stated. Well, I guess if you say so. Do you want to hold my hand as we go? She asked. I didn't respond, I just grabbed her hand and smiled. She glanced at her watch, and a look of panic spread across her face. Oh my gosh, we're going to be late. I would say the next 30 seconds were a blur, but that would be an understatement for how fast it really was. Before I knew it, I was inside a classroom behind Mirio, surrounded by a group of girls. You might wonder why I was terrified. Well, may I remind you that all females have superpowers where I come from? To say it was intimidating for a 10-year-old is a fair assessment. But what I did not expect was what I was about to hear next. Ms. Aizawa, I brought me your child? Then the class erupted in a torrent of questions. Ms. Aizawa is a mom? She had a kid. After the whole, is Aizawa my mother? Fiasco, she quickly took me outside the classroom and apologized. Izuku, I'm so sorry. I took a nap and lost track of time. But instead of her usual monotone voice, she actually sounded sincere. I gave her a smile and said, It's okay, Ms. Aizawa. I just want to go and move my stuff and go to sleep. I said tiredly. Oh, don't worry, Izuku. Everything is already moved in, so you just have to unpack. But you'll have to stay in the classroom for a bit because I need a substitute. I'm sorry, sweetie. She smiled and extended her hand toward my head. I wanted to flinch, but I stood my ground. She patted my head softly and gave a warm smile I didn't think she was capable of. I had met her once when they introduced me to the people who had custody of me, but she didn't stand out compared to the others. She even seemed cool, even cruel at times. But now she seemed sweet and almost motherly. I know it's strange to feel that way from a head pat. I was emotionally and socially awkward, so maybe that was it, but she seemed so nice. After a few seconds, the contact ended, and she grabbed my hand and led me back in. Hello, class. May I have your attention, please? Now, I know many of you have questions, but the first is this little man here is Izuku Midoriya, she announced. The class erupted in whispers about whether I was her long-lost brother or if she had lost custody of me, etc. Class, if you don't be quiet, I will be forced to punish you all, and you wouldn't want that, would you? The class suddenly went silent. Good. Now, as I was saying, he is Izuku Midoriya, a child I have been assigned to take care of. Now, any questions? The class erupted with questions about me. After a few minutes, I was getting pretty tired. So I nervously tugged on Aizawa's shirt sleeve and asked in a quiet voice, I'm so tired, Aizawa. Can I take a nap? Pretty please. I gave her my best puppy dog eyes. She seemed taken aback for a moment, then regained her composure and gave a slight nod with a smile. Of course, sweetheart. Here. She picked me up in a gentle hold and walked me over to a sleeping bag. She laid me down and tucked me in. Now, you might be wondering how many oohs and AWS she got for doing this. I would tell you, but I literally can't count that high. After a little while, I fell asleep. Soon after that, I fell into a routine. I would wake up early and make breakfast, which wasn't very good at first, but practice makes perfect. All Might, or as I called her, Yagi, was so sweet and always gave me a big hug before she went to work. Then there was Midnight, who was nice and always ate my food with a smile. She gave me treats and games and always doted on me. She was like a grandma who always had sweets to give to her grandchild. Then the person who felt most like a mother to me was Eraserhead, better known to me as Shoko. Of course, I went to school specifically, Somei Junior High. Now I would be fine with it, but Somei was not a typical junior high. Instead, it was a prestigious, world-renowned school known for its exceptional heroes. While that might sound appealing, it was a pre-hero school, meaning almost all, if not all, students were female. So, I stuck out like a sore thumb. I had my own bathroom and uniform, but it also meant I was looked down upon and felt like an outcast. Despite that, I made a few friends. Ida Tenya was an uptight, law-abiding person, but a lovable one. Yes, she could be a stickler for rules, but she was kind and did her best. She was always there for me and never put me down like the other students. That was the one thing that separated her from everyone else. While she had her doubts about my dream of becoming a hero, it stemmed from a fear of me getting hurt, not because I was a guy. This was also before she knew about my power, and we weren't there yet. Then there was Momo Yaoyorozu. To put it bluntly, she was wealthy, innocent to a point, and sweet. She seemed almost unapproachable, but in reality, she was quite alone. She had never had any real friends, at least not anyone who wasn't after her money or social status. We met when Ida introduced us. We had a rough start at first. She was so used to being used that she didn't even realize when she ignored me. But eventually, she opened up, and after that, we became good friends. We were always there for each other. While I went to school, I had a great home life. I was even trained by my new parents. For once in my life, I was so satisfied and happy that I didn't realize how many years had passed until it was too late, and I was set to go to UA High. That may not seem bad, but I knew the training was going to be intense. Also, the qualification test was going to be challenging. Now, I'm sure I'm not offending anyone when I say tests can be tough. They're even tougher when you feel like you don't belong. That feeling of embarrassment and shame is torturous. But for me, it was worse. I was a guy and, to boot, not very intimidating. I was short and somewhat plain-looking. You might be wondering why I felt this way. To answer that, I was at the UA entrance exams, and every single girl seemed to do a double take or glare at me. To make matters worse, I tripped. As I braced myself for an embarrassing fall, a soft hand touched my chest, and I felt weightless. A girl with beautiful chocolate eyes and a brown bob cut caught me. She had a big smile and was about to speak before I started to float away. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot to turn off my quirk. You might need to straighten out first to land on your feet," she said in a panicked voice. I did as she suggested, and the weight of gravity returned. It was strange how much of a difference it. Wow, you have a lot of muscle for a girl. When I grabbed you, it felt like I was holding a brick wall. "What's your secret?" she asked. "Oh, and I'm Uraraka Ochako," she added, extending her hand. I shook her hand and replied, "I'm Izuka Midoriya." She seemed to finally take a good look at my face, and shock spread across her own. "You're," she began. "Yep, I'm a guy, and thanks for saving me from eating dirt," I said. What are you doing here, Midoriya?" she questioned. "Same as everyone else," I responded. "I don't mean to come off as rude, but how are you going to do that with no quirk?" she asked. I smiled, put my finger to my mouth, and said, "That's a secret." Her face turned red, and she stammered something I didn't understand before walking away. I thought she was acting a bit strange, but I just moved on and entered the testing room. It felt weird and awkward at first entering the testing room. All the girls' eyes were on me, and I couldn't help but blush. Most of them looked at me with confusion, some with disgust and even anger. The creepiest one was a girl who looked like a grape, staring at me with eyes that were less than innocent. It got even more awkward when Ida noticed me. "Oh, Izuku, you didn't have to," she exclaimed. A wave of confusion washed over me and I said, what?" Now it was Ida's turn to be confused. "So, what are you, here for?" "Well, you see, I'm here for you and to take the test." An air of silence followed. Ida looked confused but also somewhat sad. But you're a guy. How do you plan on getting through?" she asked awkwardly. "Well, you just have to wait and see, Ida." "Yeah, I guess I will." With that, we went our separate ways. We had to take some tests before we got to the combat test. We had the basics: math, science, history, etc. But there were some curveballs, like first aid, which I thought would be taught later, and some other random subjects. I scored in the top 15. I got 13, to be exact. My best score was in math, and my worst was in history. It wasn't a bad score, it was just my weakest subject. It was also kind of hard to keep my focus when everyone looked at me like I was a freak. I got pushed around a lot when we got up to leave. Some girls took it further by shoulder-checking me, while others tried to group around me. I may have been able to joke around with Ida and Momo, but with anyone else, I just froze. It led to more than one girl taking advantage of my awkwardness before I switched to my new school, but I could still remember her name, Kaken. No matter what I did, her name remained in my mind. My mother had been the biggest source of trouble in my life, but she was someone else who made my life a living nightmare. She outcast me and got the other kids to rally against me. She made me terrified to talk to people my age, and my mother made me scared to talk to adults. She was one part of the problem that left me feeling so alone. As we grew older, things only seemed to get worse. Sometimes, when I heard loud noises or thought about her too much, a tight feeling would settle in my chest, making it hard to breathe. Tears would flow, and I couldn't stop them. But that's not the part of the story we're focusing on right now. After finishing the test, I was pulled aside by Midnight. We discussed the situation, and she informed me that I would need to take the test in a separate room from the other students. I agreed and was led to a smaller testing area. It seemed my task would be quite different from the others. All Might sat in the center of the room, with Eraserhead on her left and Midnight on her right. It was rare to see them all together without bickering. They sat quietly until All Might stood and pressed a button. Suddenly, the entire room began to shake as the stark white walls transformed into a massive arena, supported by grand marble pillars. I struggled to keep my balance as the floor shifted. Aizawa seemed pleased by this, though I wouldn't understand why until much later. Just as quickly as it began, the shaking stopped, and a small mouse hybrid appeared in the center of the room, above the others. A smile spread across its face as it spoke. "Why, hello, young Midoriya. It's a pleasure to finally meet you," it exclaimed. Still in shock from the sudden changes, I could only nod in response. "You must be wondering who I am. Well, if you must know, I am Nizu, the principal of this fine school," the creature continued cheerfully. This time, I managed to respond. It's a pleasure, Nizu. But how do you know my name? I don't think we've met unless..." Before I could finish my thought, Nizu interrupted. Young Midoriya, not much goes by without my watchful gaze noticing it. Yue is quite prominent, after all. I believe the first male with a quirk would be something I would notice. You might be wondering how I reacted. It was with a mix of fear and confusion. After all, when you guard a secret so tightly, you don't expect someone you just met to openly acknowledge it. The only people who knew were my guardians, and they wouldn't tell anyone, right? Nizu seemed to take delight in my shock and smiled broadly before continuing. "You must be very confused. Let me explain how I know. You see, not much goes by without me knowing. When All Might brought you to us with a significant injury, it certainly piqued my interest. But I wasn't surprised when you survived. You had one of the best doctors in the world on your case. Recovery Girl has saved thousands of lives after all. When I learned that Yagi visited you, It confirmed my suspicion that she felt guilty about what happened to you. But then the question arose, why? The only fight where she got into serious trouble was against that formidable woman, All for One. So, of course, I had to insist she tell me everything. Silence followed her lengthy explanation. She had managed to compel the number one hero to do something like it was nothing. How powerful was she? Nizu cleared her throat, pulling me back from my thoughts. So, you may be wondering why your test is separate from everyone else's. That's because you are a boy with a quirk, the only boy with a quirk. If you went out there, the media would have a field day. But there's also another important reason. You are a boy aiming to be a hero. Villains will seek to crush you just to claim the title of having defeated the first boy with a quirk. Your test won't just assess your fighting ability, it will test your capacity to overcome obstacles much stronger than. This is what your guardians are for, they will judge your abilities. If you can overcome what they throw at you, I believe you can overcome anything. Remember, Izuku plus Ultra. With that, the floor beneath me gave way, and I began to free fall. Free falling is terrifying, especially when you land ungracefully. To put it simply, it hurt a lot. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a pile of rubble, feeling utterly miserable. Every bone ached and protested against any movement. When I attempted to stand, I realized my legs resembled limp spaghetti. They were broken in multiple places. You might wonder how enjoyable it is to set your own bones, only to break them again to align them properly because of your super healing. It was pure agony. Just as I was questioning why this was happening to me, I heard an angelic voice. I thought perhaps the fall had caused more damage than I realized, and that death had finally caught up with me. But then I recognized the voice. It was President Mike. Hello, little viewer. It's me, President Mike. No, stop looking around for me. I'm coming through the speakers above you. Yes, the one right above you is me, the President Mike, all in one speaker. So what's going on? I asked, still disoriented. Good question, little viewer. You are currently in your UA placement test. Your job is simple, protect the students from the robots. That's not too bad. I just have to destroy the robots or separate the students from them. But that's not all. You can't destroy the robots. Also, it's the students' test to take them down. What will you do, little viewer? But before you come up with a totally rad plan, you need to put on this suit and mask. With that, a black, loose-fitting suit fell out from a box. It looked like something a robber would wear to break into a house. The mask was just a ski mask. I felt like a poorly designed villain. This was going to be tough. When I first stepped out from the small hill of rubble I had formed, I realized I was in a city, or at least a mock one. If I hadn't known I was in a test, I would have believed it to be a massive town. But there were no people, no cars, only the distant sounds of conflict. I focused my mind. I had a job to do if I wanted to pass my test. I thought about what I had at my disposal: super regeneration, a questionable costume, and of course, every single normal human sense and strength cranked up to 11. What's with that look on your face? Oh, did I forget to explain what my quirk did? Sorry, when you get this old, sometimes you forget. While it may seem that I only had super regeneration as a quirk, it came with some neat side effects. Because my muscles were in a constantly regenerating state, my muscle mass was around 3 to 5 times more than it should be, and it only increased as my body matured because I could handle more muscle. My senses were at the peak of what a normal human could have, my bones were denser, and so on. Nothing groundbreaking, but it did give me an edge. Now where was I? Yes, trying to be a wannabe hero. As I took stock of my abilities and what I had at my disposal, a plan began forming in my mind. But before I could put anything into action, an annoying voice buzzed in my ear. Little listener, I almost forgot. The students know you're coming and that you're supposed to help support them, but they've also been told that being saved by you will result in some points being deducted, so they may not be open to your help. Expect some resistance. Wait, what? Of course, there was no response. My job was already hard, and now they do this. It would be manageable if they let me bring some sort of weapon, but of course not. So they won't be open to my help, which means I'll have to wait for them to get desperate or encourage them to accept my assistance. Well, the longer I just stand here, the lower my chances of being accepted go. Let's just get this over with. I got up, stretched, and hoped I didn't break too many bones. I set off, wandering toward the sounds of fighting. At first, it wasn't as bad as I thought, but boy was I wrong. She called it resistance, right? Tell that to my broken ribs. I wanted to save some random kid who was obviously in over her head. She had some super laser that could shoot from her stomach. But after a few good blasts, she keeled over in pain. I thought she was hurt, so I ran over. The blonde girl seemed to look sick, but she didn't appear to be in extreme pain. I smiled at her, but then quickly felt foolish. I had a mask on after all. My smile faded as I thought about how silly I must look, a student wanting to be a hero, dressed like a cheap off-brand villain. But another thought crossed my mind. This was the first step. My first real step at being a hero. I was going to save somebody. I was going to be a hero to this person. All Might's voice echoed in my head. It's all okay, for I am here. A smirk touched my lips, and I remembered why I was here. I wanted to be a hero just like her. I steeled myself and began coming up with a plan. The girl had taken down 10 robots out of pretty good, all things considered, that left me with 15 to take down on my own. As I got closer, the girl seemed to be worse off than I thought. Even as the robots approached, she didn't move from the ground. If I was going to get her out of there, I would either have to get the attention of the robots if they would even pay me any mind, or I could grab the girl and make a mad dash. Both plans relied on the uncertainty of either the robots' programming or my own stamina and strength. Or I could try to fight the robots. While I couldn't destroy them, the girl seemed to pack quite a punch. I could just point her and let her fire. Kind of like a gun or a laser pointer. But that plan was even more uncertain, though it would help achieve both our goals. She could get points, and I could make sure she was safe. I had to make a decision, and fast. I had no option. I knew I probably couldn't take on all those robots alone. I couldn't depend on this girl, who was obviously out of the fight. So that left me with the option of making a run for it with the girl in tow, of course. But how was I supposed to do that? She was surrounded with no real way out. At least they couldn't fly and swoop in from the sky. Wait, the sky? If I could somehow get her off the ground with me, I could jump over the robots, or, if I was lucky, into a building. Some of them did have rockets, but how to use them? I needed something to absorb the impact. It couldn't be too heavy or weigh us down, and I needed more than one rocket to get us off the ground. If I could manage to take the arm from one of the robots, it seemed to serve as both a weapon and a holder for the rockets. I decided to take a risky glance to see if I could spot the one that had been shooting at her earlier. Luck appeared to be on my side. The robot stood a few yards up the road, its empty face scanning the fight, ensuring no other robots needed assistance, but it never fired at the girl because its fellow robots were in the way. Another small miracle. As if it had been armed and ready, I would have never been able to reach it from this distance. Now all I had to do was get something to help. Suddenly, a scream jolted me from my thoughts. I realized she was completely trapped. I couldn't reach her, get a rocket, and find something to withstand an explosion. Wait, I had fallen from 30 meters and survived. Sure, it left my legs feeling like jelly, but I lived. So, I could probably withstand an explosion. With that, my first plan to save someone kicked into high gear. I dashed up the road toward the robot, grabbing its arm and pulling. Then I remembered it was a robot, made of metal, while I was just a squishy human. Metal is hard, humans are not. The robot seized my left arm and threw me like a rag doll. I hit the ground hard and I felt something pop. I ignored it and got back up. Sure, it hurt, but I had to keep going. I charged at it, trying to throw the massive robot off balance, but it didn't even budge. Once again, a heavy iron hand gripped me tightly. Thinking quickly, I waited until it was about to throw me and then wrapped my body around its arm. The robot's response was immediate. Its arm locked in an attempt to shake me off, but it was too late. I used the momentum of the throw and my own strength to rip off its arm. It worked. Take that, you stupid robot. Just like that, I had what I thought was the key to my master plan. However, my hopes were dashed when I looked down to see that I had pulled off the wrong hand. So, I had a 50-pound iron club shaped like a hand versus a robot with a rocket launcher. It seemed totally fair. I could try the same trick again, but I had a feeling it wouldn't fall for it twice. Time to take a different approach and hope it would stop moving. With a roar, I charged forward, dodging a missile aimed at me. The robot backed up and unleashed a barrage of missiles. You might think I couldn't win by just charging at it. It would blast me before I got close. You would be right if I were charging in recklessly. I waited for the click I had bet everything on. Either the robot had to reload its arm, or it would use all its missiles. But by that time, I would have to make a mad dash for it if necessary. So, I waited, ducking and weaving for my life. Just when I was ready to charge, I heard a dull click. With that, every muscle in my legs propelled me forward. I had to get there before it reloaded, and since its arm was the key, I had to be quick. I took a deep breath, steadying my shaking legs. Everything felt surreal. I thought back on what had led me to this moment and smiled. Then I ran. I sprinted as fast as I could with a giant metal robotic hand in tow, which meant not fast enough. I was about 5 feet away from the robot when I heard something roll and then a click. Its arm was aimed at me. Now, one might think I had played all my cards, but that person would be mistaken. I had the ultimate weapon, a giant metal robotic hand. My hand slipped behind my back to grab my ace in the hole as I slid underneath the robot's extended arm. I was right beneath it as I fully unsheathed the Mega Slapper, and slap it did. The robot seemed to realize that firing a rocket this close would surely damage it. Its cold metallic eyes appeared to be searching for a solution one I had to ensure would never come. I tucked my knees and rolled, springing up with my hands gripping the ultimate slapping machine. My arms reared back, my muscles coiling like a spring ready to be released. Then I swung and it was a beautiful thing. The Mega Slapper slammed into the robot's head, crushing it like a tin can. Ripping it free from its wires and servos, it spiraled off into the distance. A smile spread across my face. My plan had actually worked. However, the Mega Slapper looked worse for wear. Its elbow joint was bent, and the wrist was at an awkward angle, resembling more of a frail old man asking for a high five than a functioning robot. I quickly ran over to the robot's remaining arm. I placed my foot on its shoulder and twisted my upper body with all my strength. With a decisive motion, I pulled it from the socket. Missiles tumbled out from where the arm used to be. The first part of my plan had succeeded, but it wasn't over yet. There was still someone who needed me and my exceptionally awesome new robot arm equipped with rockets.